Welcome to the Rocky Road Podcast, brought to you by Rockbusters, with your host, Dennis Wager. Dennis is a best-selling author and an expert in demolition, rock, and concrete breaking, as well as a professional blaster. He is also president of Rockbusters Incorporated, along with his son, Brian. On the podcast, you'll hear exciting stories of how these challenge types of rock and concrete jobs are done. You learn about the uses of expanding grout and explosive devices. But furthermore, you'll hear about some of the hurdles and struggles entrepreneurs and business owners have had along the way, how they got started, and how they broke through the obstacles and found the path to success. Along with that, some insight for young people and people wanting to get into the industry. So listen in. I hope you enjoy the show. Now, here's Dennis Wager.
Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining in. I'd like to welcome to the show John Norman from California. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, so tell us about this very interesting rescue that we were just chatting about.
Yeah, we had a really unusual rescue just before Christmas. It was a gentleman who became trapped in kind of a boulder cave right at the edge of the water in Sunset Cliffs, San Diego, California.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were staying down by SeaWorld, right?
Yes, that's right next to SeaWorld, just outside of downtown San Diego. It's, a popular beach area. It's got a bunch of cliffs and, an old seawall that, has been added to over many years, apparently.
Right. And then you were saying that the gentleman was caving. We don't really know what he was actually doing there, but somehow got trapped.
Yeah, it seems like maybe he was trying to, dig out some dirt or, was for some reason exploring the little, sea caves formed by all the piled up, 1 and 2 meter boulders. And he managed to slip, get stuck, and very thoroughly pinned in place by his left leg.
Yeah, that's crazy. And he was there for quite some time too, I think, right?
Yeah, at least 24 hours. He had originally said he'd been there for 3 days, but by that point he was pretty disoriented. It's not, completely clear, but he was there for at least a day.
Okay. So what kind of condition was he in when you got there?
He was screaming for help. He was cold. San Diego Fire had been doing a really good job of keeping him warm and giving him fluids and things. But the tide was coming in and he was terrified he was going to drown. And apparently he had gotten up to his feet at some point.
Wow. Yeah, that would be pretty terrifying. I couldn't imagine being in that position. It wouldn't be comfortable. So tell us a bit about how you responded to that.
Oh, sure. So I loaded up everything I had at the shop here for rock removal, and our SAR team brought San Bernardino Sheriff's Cave Rescue, brought everything, microblasters, scaling bars. I brought a pneumatic rock drill and a box of grout I happened to have laying around from a project, and feathers and wedges, and my microblasting setup, and all of my high explosives blasting equipment in case we were going to work with the bomb squad. And, I really didn't know what we were going to expect. Headed down there, and we got there before dawn, and it turns out we had to wait for the tide to go down a bit, but we assessed it.
Yeah, so maybe just tell us a little bit about your relationship with the San Bernardino Fire Department, or how that all come together.
Sure. So in the U.S., search and rescue is organized by the sheriff of the county you're in typically, and I've been volunteering with San Bernardino Sheriff's Cave and Technical Rescue for close to 20 years. They are the only cave and abandoned mine rescue resource devoted to that in the state of California. And so we respond 24/7. We're all volunteer and we're unpaid.
Interesting. I know we used to do a lot of work with the Richmond Fire Department here in BC. And now we're a corporate sponsor of the Britannia Beach Fire Department. And I was mentioning this to the fire chief up there, and he's very interested in it as well. So it'd be nice to see if there's some kind of mechanism where one fire department could communicate with the others. I'm sure there is. But
I think you're right. USAR, Urban Search and Rescue, where you're removing, vehicles, collapsed buildings, things like that from people, is traditionally something fire is very good at. They tend to be oriented around like sawing of concrete, using cranes, using airbags, things of that nature. But they don't really do the traditional rock breaking, maybe like we do with grout, explosives, splitters, that sort of thing.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed right away was when we first got our contract with the Richmond Fire Department was our very first call out. They called us after a house had burned down and the structure was semi-intact. The roof was all burned off. And there was 3 firefighters on each side spraying water on the walls. And then I came in with an excavator and just knocked them down, crunched them up, and swung a bucket full around. One of the firemen just sprayed water on it to make sure it was out. And then I just made a pile. And it really took about, 20 minutes. And then after it was all done, I just, we're finished. The firemen come up and talk to me, and they go, "Wow, that's really amazing." And like, we're used to doing this with an axe. And I was like kind of surprised, but I said, "Well, why would you do it with an axe when you got an excavator?" But they didn't think about that, right? Like the fire department, I find, is very trained very well at what they do, but their ways about doing it are pretty concrete, right? Like that's the way they do it.
I think you're right. I believe that, at least in the U.S., and I'm sure Canada is similar, because of all the wildfires where they, put resources together from all over the country and sometimes all over North America. They're very, very homogenous and standardized in the equipment and techniques they use. But as a result of that, they're not necessarily doing, new things that are all out of the book and, innovative all the time. It has to kind of come down nationally before fire departments really start doing it.
Right. And then that's why I wanted to have you on the show to just talk about this, because maybe you could explain a little bit how you were saying that the guy's leg was pinned, and you can explain your story, how it happened. But how it was, you had to break it out around his leg. Okay.
Well, one thing we're lucky in California, we have a very good statewide mutual aid system. And, we had worked with this department before when we did a cave rescue about 6 months ago. And, so they knew to look up the resource that might, be able to do cave work. We had brought all of our rock removal stuff. We we showed up, we assessed it, we talked to their, incident commander and their techs on the ground. And what they told us is that, there's really no easy way to get him out from the top because his lower half of his body was pinned. There's probably 2 meters of rock between him and the outside. But the day before, they had been able to get their smallest, USAR technician in, squeezed between some rocks underneath him at low tide, and they had worked up to where his feet were. It was very tight, but they thought that if we waited till the tide went down again, maybe 8 or 9 in the morning, we would have another chance at, getting him free.
How did that work?
Well, so what we did, as soon as it was safe to do so, they brought a lifeguard down there to watch, the edge of the water because it was kind of rough. Brought us some resources, led us down there, and we have our smallest guy, who's something like 5'0" and skinny. Him and myself went down, and we took a look at the access. It was possible to shimmy in your back between some rocks. So the first thing we decided is we've got to get access. We're not going to be able to do much in the position we're at. Their tech, through great effort, managed to drill some holes and bash away some loose rock. But what we did, we started with, there was a pillar of rock right smack in the work area. We drilled one hole, and we used about a 1 gram microblaster charge and broke that pillar loose from the underside of the rock it was hanging on. It was either concrete or rock. It wasn't totally clear. It was kind of weathered from the ocean. Got that out of the way. And then we were able to kind of get in there and see what we had, which was basically 2 feet and a big, probably a cubic yard rock with a sharp point that was pinning this man's left leg down.
Yeah, that's kind of the most sensitive type of job you can imagine. I'm sure, it's literally life and death situation.
It really is. We had tested microblasting once before on a human subject. There was a deceased person in Joshua Tree that had gone into a rock cave in the granite there and died during the summer when it was very hot. And they fire was not able to get them out because there was, nowhere to get a crane and lift anything. It was deep in the wilderness. And we had blasted about 200 pounds of rock in kind of a ring around the torso, and everyone was okay with it. Obviously, the gentleman was deceased. There was no real risk to doing it. And we kind of proved that technique because we were able to get out without putting any marks on that body and successfully recover it. So, this one, we started about a meter away from where he was located, blasted that rock out, makes a bang about like maybe a 38 pistol or something like that, kind of echoes and it's kind of loud in a confined space. We, get back out. We were able to get outside and shoot that. But then when we got up to him, we're like, okay, this rock is directly pinning his leg. And, maybe we should try a gentler technique first. So we drilled 3 holes and we tried to do feathers and wedges. So, those are your 3-part pins for, splitting rock with mechanical, wedging. And I managed to get 2 in. We dropped one of them and lost it. We replaced it. We weren't able to really pressure up the 3rd wedge. There was not much room to swing a single jack or any kind of hammer. So we did as best we could getting pressure on them, and it, not surprisingly didn't break. Breakwaters and seawalls are typically made with very hard, dense rock to, resist the ocean. So we weren't successful with the feathers and wedges. We put that, maybe 10 to 20 centimeters below his leg, and we tried to just break off a flake unsuccessfully. So at that point, I took a picture of it and we sent it up to the command post and said, hey, this didn't work. Are you okay with us trying to blast right on our subject? And they basically looked out and they said, honestly, we got to get this done before the next tide comes. Even if it hurts him, that's fine. We'll have a paramedic ready to tourniquet his leg if it gets, injured or something. So yeah, you're clear to do it. So I knew this was going to be probably the most gentle shot we've ever had to make. So we drilled a hole right under those feathers and wedges and cleaned it up really good. One thing about the microblasting, you're not using, say, like the Royax cartridges. You're going to drill a hole that's fairly, oversized by a few millimeters. You just need to dust it, throw it down the bottom, and stem it up. The microblaster tools, we're talking very small charges, like holes that are 10 millimeter or less, and they use a metal tool that fits tightly in that hole to keep the energy in. So you have to have good straight holes, and you have to clean every little bit of dust out. So we spent quite a bit of time cleaning that, and we knew also if we blasted this and it didn't go the way we wanted it, once it's starting to get a little bit pre-fractured, we might have a hard time doing a second shot. So we wanted to have a perfect shot on that. So hole prep is the key to using these little tiny charges really effectively. And the other thing we did is we left those feathers and wedges, the 2 holes that were filled, tensioned up so that hopefully that would provide some relief and some pressure for the rock to break the direction we want to and get his leg out.
Yeah, it all helps, right? As soon as you get pressure in each hole, no matter where the hole is, it all helps in the right direction. Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Drilling a line of holes, getting pressurized holes, putting splitters in holes, anything like that will, in my experience, encourage the rock to go the way you want it.
Yeah.
At least increases your chances.
Yeah, and we were talking about using the small Royax charges for that as well, and we think that would work too, like the small 22 millimeter, like 7-gram cartridges. It would give you like a small shot.
I think that definitely has an application. One thing after experimenting with this extensively, so this 1-gram shot, we fired it off. We were able to break just enough rock into like 3 or 4 flakes, and it did cleave on those already drilled and wedged holes, and we were able to get his leg free. But yeah, I think a little bit larger cartridge could have worked. We probably would have had to put some, blankets or carpet or something to help control any fly rock. And I probably would have put it down a bit farther. We only had 20 centimeters or, so it had to break. But, that little bit larger cartridge, I think you could set it deeper in the rock. I think that would have a decent chance of working. I think you could also, if the hole can't be that deep, you could put irons in. I don't know if you ever use those with the Royax, where you put a little bit of stemming in, and then you make have a heavy steel bar with a welded on round cap or something.
Yeah, we have those
sometimes
too.
with quarrying. Yeah,
Good
you
for
sometimes
shallow
use
holes.
those irons.
Yeah, that's it exactly.
So yeah, you might need something like that.
Yeah, and then the other thing too is once the rock, like you said, once the rock starts to come apart, then it starts to loosen up in different areas too, and then kind of works the way towards the hole.
Yeah, and it is also possible to work like this with like lightweight det cord and or just blasting caps and holes. The disadvantage of that though, like the blasting caps do generate shrapnel, and any of those high explosives are going to make a really, really loud crack, especially in a confined space. I've been hit with air blast before from just a few meters of det cord. So, you probably need full hearing protection, even if you're not worried about the rock going your direction. Whereas, these 1.4 blasting techniques are just much less violent.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really a good use for the pyrotechnic stuff too. It's just with the the way the charge dissipates after the rock cracks and stuff. It doesn't send things flying. It's really key. I think this could be a good thing to carry on with, and then get more fire departments or search and rescue teams aware of it, right? And it's kind of unique. Like I don't see anybody else really bringing blasting or even rock splitting or cracking or breaking, whatever you want to call it, to the table for this kind of work, right? But in cases like this, I mean, it is really the best way.
Oh, I agree. And, we've had other precedent for rock, removal type stuff. The High Sierras in Inyo and Mono County, they've had at least 2 different rescues. They had one not long before our cave rescue there, where some people were rock hounding out of, they're searching for gems or something up in the, the backside of, the Sierras where Mount Whitney and the, tallest mountain in the lower 48 is. And probably a 1.2 meter boulder rolled over on the guy's leg and pelvis and pinned him. And so they ended up, I think, drilled some holes, put bolts in it, tried some mechanical advantage to at least stabilize it, with ropes. And they brought a couple of high lift jacks, like big farm jacks, and we used that to push the rock away from the guy and get him out. But I mean, for even wilderness search and rescue, rock work does come in, and certainly cave rescue, and then USAR, collapsed buildings and things. I think one of the places you're going to see that where it's very much like rock is going to be like those older buildings that have unreinforced concrete or stone blocks. That's just like you're building a basement or quarrying, right? It's going to break much more effectively than it will. It's going to be much quicker to break it than the sod or something like that.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind for me, talking with this, do you think it would have been useful to have like an airbag or an air pushing bag underneath the fellow that was trapped?
They did try airbags. They weren't able to, I think, get enough of a bite to move any of the stuff. And also those rocks were grouted in place. So they weren't moving like without a lot of violence. They'd also tried sawing and jackhammering from the top. And, not surprisingly, if something that's weathered the sea for 50 years is pretty sound and it didn't get anywhere.
Yeah, I see all that. And I think even another thing that comes to mind too is if you had a situation where you had a boulder that had rolled on top of someone, even just to drill it and put a bolt in it, with an eye you could hook a chain to and roll it with a machine or pull it with a come along or something like that.
Yeah, that was done on that High Sierra thing. I think they did bolt that boulder and they either used it to capture the progress while they were jacking or maybe just to keep it from sliding down, because they're on a hill. But I don't think they had enough power to actually move it. I think they were able to hold it in place with their bolts, but they weren't able to get it to move on its own without the jack and other tools.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So anything come to mind of practicing these kind of techniques? Like, is there places to go practice? Or, we talked a bit about, trying to invite other authorities to kind of take a look at it, but how does everybody come together in this, in your opinion?
Well, there's a couple of things. I think whenever you have any of these different public safety agencies, getting those joint trainings together is a great way to share knowledge, information. If they like it, they'll either know who to call or they'll start developing the capability in their own. Like I'm proposing, San Diego maybe do a training on, rock demolition and, good place for that sort of thing, at least where we are, is going to be like those old stream beds and washes where, it's common, like maybe they have a county park, they develop it, but it can still be potentially flood control because there's a river bottom behind it. So typically the river bottom's full of rocks and often stuff they dragged out of the part they turned into a park, and they sort of leave those kind of places as a buffer, to keep stormwater away from homes and things. Probably something like that is a good bet if you got anything like that in your area. Any kind of like sort of reserve land for, flood purposes and things like that. I think that's not a bad place. Counties can often get permission from, parks and flood control and other agencies to use resources like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So now we've been involved in a few of these national disasters where they have slides, into the rivers, or they'll have huge boulders where it prevents the fish or the salmon from spawning. We've gone, into the rivers to blast as well with the Royex, the pyrotechnic products, and it's always been a good thing. But yeah, I really see it as just kind of like we went through with the fire department on this freezer warehouse that we did. It was a huge fire. The freezer warehouse was probably about 3-4 football fields, and ironically, there was a similar one, actually very similar, that happened around the same time in Chicago. And the same challenges that the fire department here faced, those guys in Chicago faced. But if they would have had a chance to talk to each other, they could have prevented a lot of the things and made life easier.
Oh, I agree. I know they have conferences and so forth, but I don't know how much these different agencies talk, because other than, adhering to national standards and updates and things, I don't know that all of these talk if they're not in the same region.
Yeah, well, one of the things that came out of our fire work was we actually did a speech at the International Fire Chiefs Association in Denver. They do have an association where all the fire departments belong. And we did a presentation together, me and the fire chief, as how the industry can work together with the fire departments and how they all, kind of learn from that. And that was very, very well received.
Well, I know that FEMA here, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, they have these different regions. They have like 6 or 8 of them in the country. And if there's, a huge earthquake or disaster in one region, they'll typically fly everyone in from another region so that the home team, who's busy and also has to take care of their families and get relieved, can get a break. I know that they have made extensive use of cranes and crane operators. That's like, if you want to be on a FEMA team and you're crane certified, they'll definitely like put you on right away. I don't know how much use they've made of like conventional demolition, because I believe what their current strategy is like for building stuff is they call it delayering, where they assume things fall like a pancake, and they basically they'll do 2 things. They'll start maybe with the help of a structural engineer, if it's a big one, they'll start pulling material off the top and exposing layers. But then in the meantime, when it's safe, they'll also try to cut accesses and tunnels in between and probe and look for people either to prioritize, or maybe they can get them out, through, less conventional means.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, I think it's great. So I think, a lot of it is to just kind of capture, what happened, and maybe we could write an article or what have you, and contact, other fire departments and just see what the interest level is and go from there.
I really think being able to modify, like a cave or a mine or collapse or rock pile environment by breaking the rock is a game changer. Rather than having to think about, can I move it or can I somehow move the person out of it? Being able to just remove the obstruction, sometimes that takes hours or days off of a rescue.
Well, it's the same with concrete. If you have a building collapse and then there's people trapped in the building, right? Concrete comes apart the same as rock does. So I think if maybe we're able to write some sort of a procedure or something like that, that could be adopted and practiced. Because we do the same kind of things in these tunnel jobs. Like, we've been involved in tunnels, where they'll have a tunnel boring machine that's stuck. And it'll be, 100 feet underground and 600 meters down the tunnel. Once it binds up on something, it gets jammed, and then they have to physically go in there and chip it out, like, honestly, bit by bit. So it's much different than doing big blasts. Like you're down to the little nitty gritty details of almost like what pebble of what rock got stuck and taking it apart, in a very much more detailed way, and a gentle way.
The tunneling industry seems to be very, very good at going through whether it's solid rock or whether it's loose soil or bad ground. But as soon as you get like a weird mix of those, I think that's where you get those problems. There's no one tool or engineered technique that's really bulletproof for those random big rocks that appear in the excavation, or small rocks when they were expecting bedrock, or I don't know. I feel like that's definitely a problem.
Yeah, I do too. And it's also now that, we can say that this kind of stuff is on the table to do. It really leaves a lot of credibility to like bigger jobs. Like if there's a highway to put in, or there's there's a sensitive area due to a building or whatever, and people are worried about being environmentally friendly, or something more sensitive, right? We can say, well, hey, like look at what it can do on a small scale, and what it can do on a bigger scale.
Oh, absolutely. We have I do some work for a mine remediation company, and the authorities have been really opposed to blasting and high explosives until we had a job where, there were boulders all over the place. And we basically said, well, what about pyrotechnic rock removal? Like, well, okay, that's kind of midway between, equipment and blasting. And like, let's say that, we can come in with light equipment, just a couple of pickup trucks, and get this done, versus having to bring a 40-ton excavator and tear up all of your endangered plants and everything, or have to build a road to it. And they're like, yeah, you know what, let's do that. I think we're at a point where people are accepting that, technology is maybe able to make this very sensitive blasting, something that they can live with, and it's the least bad option.
I think so too. And I really appreciate you joining us on the show. Because all of this is great knowledge, and it's great, for awareness to get out there. And the more people that know about, what we can do with these kind of products is awesome.
Oh, absolutely. It's all theoretical until someone's actually done it. So, now we've done it with a live human. That's as sensitive as it gets. I feel like these products are ready for prime time.
No, I agree. I mean, you can't get any more sensitive than blasting a rock off a guy's leg. Yeah, and especially when you're in a situation where it's like life or death. If he wasn't rescued, who knows what would have happened. Like, obviously you hope for the best, but just to be able to have that call from your fire chief or whoever that person was that said, yeah, go ahead and do it, to have that trust and know that time is of the essence. You got to make a move, right? And have it come out successful. Yeah, just to have it be successful at the end of the day. I mean, now that guy's alive and out there, and he's able to enjoy the rest of his life instead of who knows what could happen.
No, I agree. It's fantastic that, we had that technology, we developed that capability, and for places that don't want to mess with having product around, most public safety agencies have access to a bomb squad, and they have magazines, and they can hold on to product if that's something they want to invest in. They don't have to be all in on it. So, we got a lot of options. So,
yeah, for sure. Okay, well, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time and joining us today. Thanks very much, John.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dennis.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you would like to be a guest on a future episode and tell us your story, visit our website at www.rockbusters.com. If you have a project and would like to learn more about our products, or if you're interested in partnering with us and becoming a distributor, give us a call. Thanks again. We appreciate your support.